Today is Wednesday, August 10th, and you should be reading from Hosea 7 through 10 and Matthew 18. And I want to look at what is going on here in Hosea first. We're reading just these few chapters right here. The whole book of Hosea is talking about condemnation a lot. The Israelites, the people of Ephraim here, what we're going to be talking about, have sinned. And the other day, Keenan brought up about how God punishes, he disciplines his own. When he calls us his children, he's going to discipline us as he is a good father. And so here is the saying. He starts out in chapter 7. He says, whenever I would heal Israel, the sins of Ephraim are exposed, the crimes of Samaria revealed. And Ephraim is actually one of the guys who is in line from the descendants of Abraham. He is one of the blessed. He is Joseph's son, Jacob's grandson, and so you see here that he is a part of the promise, part of the covenant. In fact, later on, here Hosea uses that word covenant, and so their sin, Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, their sin is idolatry, and so it's a mess. They're turning to idolatry. They're turning to looking to other nations around them, and not good stuff that they're in. They have this covenant, maybe by proxy, by a relationship, but they have this covenant with God. And you look at how they have turned themselves over to their sin. He says things like, Ephraim is a flat loaf not turned over. Ephraim is like a dove, easily deceived and senseless. It's not good things that he's saying about his child that has turned their back and rebelled against him. He says they slash themselves, appealing to their gods for grain and new wine, but they turn away from me. In a covenant relationship, it's not like a contract. It's not a signed contract. It is a promise to one another. God's promises never fail us. Our promises to him fail often. We fail him, we rebel, we turn our backs on him like Ephraim. We do things on our own. We feel like what we do is better than his decisions, his choices, and so our obedience to him fails. He says, an eagle is over the house of the Lord because the people have broken my covenant and rebelled against my law. They have rejected him, and God is very upset, and he's going to punish his children. He's going to do all kinds of things to allow them to come back to him, to realize their pain, to realize their rejection of God. He says the days of punishment are coming in chapter 9, verse 7. And then he says on down there in verse 9, punishment is coming on them for their sins. So he's constantly punishing his children, not just to be a father who is spanking his kids all the time just because he wants to. It's because he wants to call us to himself. He says, my God will reject them because they have not obeyed him in the very last verse of that chapter. And here's the last thing I want to bring up in chapter 10 here in Hosea. He says, sow righteousness for yourself. This is kind of like a plea to the Israelites. Sow righteousness for yourselves. Reap the fruit of unfailing love and break up your unplowed ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes and showers his righteousness on you. Obedience. God is calling us to obedience, and when we don't obey obey him, we're saying, my decision, my choice is better than yours, God. I want to, real quickly here, look at 1 Samuel for just a moment and think about what God said through his prophet. God says to Saul, actually, who has chosen to make his own choice in making a sacrifice at the wrong time. He didn't obey at all, and it was to his demise. But he says this, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. So again, he is saying obedience to him is what he calls us to, he commands us to. We may think, well, God wants this, God wants that, or it may be even going further to, it doesn't matter what God wants, this is what I want. I hope you don't have that kind of mindset, but probably sometimes you do. And I want to remind you, no matter what, obedience is what God commands you to. He calls you, invites you into an obedient relationship with him through a covenant. And if you rebel and you change your mind and you turn away from him, he wants to receive you back. He wants to call you into himself and remind you obedience is what he wants. He calls you to a life of worship by obedience. And so wherever you go, whatever you say, whatever you do, be reminded that God wants obedience from you. And so when you go through your day, be reminded of that. And church, until we see each other again, you are sent.